Welcome in, Mountaineer Nation. I'm Sam the Man, and this is another episode of the Mountaineer Effect. If you haven't already, smash that subscribe button. We're almost to 600 subscribers, and once we get there, I'm going to start giving away some stuff from Sam's Closet. I'm talking autographed cleats, autographed pictures, autographed jerseys. You know you want it. Hit the subscription button. As far as the thumbs up and thumbs down, click one or the other. Doesn't really matter. Leave us comments below. Tell us what you like and what you don't. Today, I got a very special guest coming in. It's my buddy Greg from the host of Puckin' Schmucks right here on YouTube. Go check him out. He's usually a hockey guy, but today we're going to talk football.
What's going on, Sam? Buddy? It's a pleasure to be here. It's going great, man. I can't lie. I'm doing great. I really wanted to get something off my chest. I had something like that was right up your alley, and I knew you would have some opinions on it. And I wanted to talk to you about what you think where Cincinnati should end up at the end of the season, if they should get invited to a playoff game or just doing a regular bowl game or something.
Well, and for the guys that watch the show regularly, they know I've shit all over Cincinnati. When Greg told me that he thought Cincinnati deserves an in, I'm like, hey, now this is going to be a good podcast because I'm not above being convinced. You know, I can see the argument for and against. I'm a very big strength of schedule guy, but Cincinnati.
I know, I've seen your arguments.
Cincinnati, I will say this, Cincinnati has shown some consistency over the past few years that's really unparalleled. And they've worked their way to this point where they really do deserve it. And I will say that. So, Greg, tell me why the Cincinnati Bearcats deserve it.
They're 12-0. Simple as that. Sam, I've listened to your arguments through it the last few weeks now. And you like you said, you've shit on Cincinnati. And I understand that. They're not a Power 5. No Power 5 has ever been selected. This is a similar situation. Okay, we got to go back to the beginning here. 2014, the football playoff championship has been created. And the argument back in the day, 2014, was, hey, this is going to give all teams, regardless of size, a shot, whether they had a strength of schedule or not. There's going to be a whole voting process. And we're going to have it. The example in 2014 was SMU. If you remember that, SMU hadn't won since the 50s and had all those vacated wins and was in turmoil. Like, hey, this gives SMU a chance to step back up, get recruiting. It's going to help everybody recruiting across the board. We're going to give the shot to the little guy. What has it been? Alabama, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Clemson. Alabama's missed the CFP one time. What is like Clemson's only missed it one time, and Oklahoma's missed it twice. It's the same teams. It creates controversy. This is what happened in 2017 with UCF going 12-0 and saying they're the national champions. You didn't give the little guy the chance. It was the whole program was created to give the little guy a chance. And now you have the Bearcats. If the Bearcats don't get selected, are they going to claim that they're the 2021 national champions? Say Georgia gets beat out first round, which this is how it should be, Sam. You give Georgia. Hey, I'll let you jump in. I'm sorry, I'm taking over.
Hey, go ahead. I like hearing what you have to say.
Let's say, okay, who are your four in right now?
I mean, honestly, like the way I see it right now, you know, it is hard for me to leave Cincinnati out. And the reason being is because there are no other undefeated schools outside of them in Georgia in the top 25. So I will give them that. Now, for what I would be looking for, my four in would be Georgia, Michigan, Alabama, and Oklahoma State. And Alabama, once Alabama loses to Georgia in the SEC championship, I cannot put Notre Dame in because they don't belong. I cannot put Ohio State in. I cannot put Mississippi, Baylor, Oregon, or Michigan State in. So really, as long as Alabama loses to Georgia, in my eyes, Cincinnati totally deserves to go in. And they will. You're right. So, I mean, I'm not too far off of the notion that Cincinnati deserves to get in. It's just, you know, all of the arguments that people have used over the past few years, of non-FBS schools, being undefeated and all of that. I mean, at one time we had all kinds of crazy undefeated schools you never heard of, but they're not there anymore. And Cincinnati's the last one standing. So, I would like to see, and if I had to put them in an order, I would probably go Georgia, Michigan, Cincinnati, Oklahoma State, just because I would like to see Cincinnati and Michigan play. I think that'd be a good game. And then that could actually give them the best chance of making it into the championship game.
See, I think it should be off the bat Georgia, Cincinnati, and Michigan and Oklahoma State. I think those are the two games. Say somehow Cincinnati beats Georgia, then we're having a whole totally different conversation. Then you take out number one team, another 12-0 team. You almost don't even need to play the national championship game because just give it to Cincinnati at that point. Hypothetical.
The way I kind of look at it is if you have a 1-4 matchup where it's like Georgia, Oklahoma State, and then you have a 2-3 matchup where it would be Michigan and Cincinnati, that would give Cincinnati a ramp up period where they can actually elevate their play to get even with Michigan. And then if they would beat Michigan, could yet elevate again, because teams that play schedules like that I look at as, really non-competitive schedules,
for sure.
They still have a ramp up period that they can go through, and they could ramp up to give Georgia a game or to give any of those teams a game. And that's for me personally, that's what I'm more interested in, is to see, is this team at their ceiling, or can they ramp it up and get to the ceiling within a 2-game span?
So with the selection committee, what is the argument for including a potentially 1 or a potentially 2-loss, should be 3-loss Alabama team in the playoffs over Cincinnati?
Well, I mean, honestly, they're 1 loss now, so I can make the argument that strength of schedule, if you take Alabama and you give them Cincinnati's schedule and they win out, you're going to laugh at them. I mean, granted, Alabama's been down. I mean, they have been down this year, but you're talking about a team that's down and they've only lost 1 game. I mean, they're down and everybody else is down is a little bit different. And that's just kind of how
that's just Nick Saban.
If you take any of these teams and you give them Cincinnati's schedule and they win out, you're gonna laugh at them. But
of course they should have won out. If they don't win out, I'll laugh at them even harder.
Yeah, but you have to look at. For me, the argument is in Cincinnati's past couple of years and what they've been overlooked the last couple of years. It's not just this year; it was last year too. And they've built something, and to deny them,
you're getting on the same argument that UF.
Go ahead.
The same argument UCF had, where they had this. UCF before, in 2016, they were undefeated as well and got snubbed, and then 2017 didn't lose a game and declared themselves national champions. You're leaving it open for schools to do that now. Just arbitrarily say, hey, we had a good season.
I also think that it's really important for Cincinnati too. And I hope the committee really looks at this, whether they will or whether they don't, I don't know. Cincinnati getting into the Final Four may be the only way they get to keep their coach, because I have a feeling Notre Dame's going to come calling yet again, and they're going to try to lure.
It's just Notre Dame's developmental program.
That it is. They're going to come call, and Notre Dame's a hard program to say no to, especially a guy like Fickell.
So is LSU.
That's a big step up. But I will say, I think if they could get into the Final Four, knowing that they're getting ready to transition into the Big 12, they may be able to get him to stay. Maybe. And I hope the committee kind of takes a look at that, because all of this coaching carousel that's going on right now is just outlandishly ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Anybody peg Brian Kelly replacing Coach O in LSU. I thought Kelly
No,
was locked in at Notre Dame.
no, and
That
I'm
not in a million
hearing
years.
that Notre Dame was only paying him like $2.5 million a year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and
Well,
because
then good for Kelly.
they're a private school, so I mean they don't have to disclose it. But I mean, West Virginia plays Neil Brown $4 million a year. So like if he's making $2.5 million at Notre Dame, what are they thinking? They got like God money. You know what I'm saying? Like it's the freaking
Yeah, right.
it's the
Literally,
Notre
God
Dame,
money.
man. Like literally, like I don't know what they're thinking. And they're not going to bring in somebody that they're going to have to pay him to come in. I mean, that's the thing. Nothing's bigger when it comes to football. Nothing's bigger than the money. That's what it's really essentially all about. I mean, who would have thought
Yeah,
Lincoln
especially
Riley
now that
was?
players can get
Yeah,
the
I mean,
what is it, NIL contracts and everything.
yep. I mean, who would have ever thought Lincoln Riley was going to leave Oklahoma and go to USC? I never saw that coming. There ain't anybody that saw that coming. But that's like I've talked about before. Like, these kids, people criticize the portal when kids are coming and going, but you don't realize like these coaches go into their homes, they sit down with their parents, they fill them full of shit, get them to sign, and then that coach may be gone before they even get to school. Like they should be able to have an opportunity
Oh, look at Scott
to
Frost with UCF in Nebraska.
yeah, I mean, you should have the opportunity to go
Same
somewhere
shit.
that's a little more favorable. And, I just, it's going to be interesting to see how all that plays
I've
out.
never seen this many coaches that have good jobs get up and leave to go to greener pastures. It's usually the coaches that are looking for jobs that got fired from another school, convincing the other school to be like, hey, I was good. You can take me and I'll be good here. Not, hey, we're going to poach your head coach. I don't remember this happening for as much as it has this year
Yeah.
already.
And that's the thing. It's going to keep on. I mean, it's going to keep on happening. I mean, there are coaches out there like, Steve Sarkisian at Texas. His time's limited. He is not going to be able to transition them into an SEC school. It's never going to happen. So, I mean, they might as well
That's the problem
fire
with
him and
Texas
just move
anyway.
on.
Texas is always going to be, a pit for coaches. You can't escape the pressure Texas has built for themselves in the last 2 decades or whatever. That's the problem with UT is that they've created an environment where they can't succeed. And you go back to Charlie Weiss, I think that's who, Charlie Strong, excuse me. Charlie Strong at Texas took a job at USF to fail there as well. Like you've killed Charlie Strong's, drive and competitiveness at Texas. It's going to be any coach behind him now. Just can't elevate that program. Texas is done. I'm sorry, UT and Austin fans.
Well, I mean, I agree with you. I think they've got more money than sense, and leaving the Big 12 to go to the SEC was the biggest mistake. I really think that was the death warrant for their program. Like, because you're so far down that you're not going to attract top tier coaches because the pressure is so bad and the fall has been going on for so long. There's nobody in the right mind going to touch that job. They're going to have to luck themselves into a good coach. Essentially, they're going to have to take a chance on, a young guy, what's his name from Coastal Carolina or somebody like that.
Does Texas become a Vanderbilt in the SEC and just kind of hope for a one-off good year like Coastal Carolina or ECU?
But I see Texas becoming just another mid-tier teams that just
strength of schedule teams.
Yeah.
Like, hey, look at how good Florida or Texas used to be when Alabama beats them.
Yeah, I mean, and Oklahoma, if in the same thing could happen to Oklahoma if they don't hire right. I mean, this hire since Lincoln left has to be right for them, and if it's not, I mean, they're going to be in trouble too. Well, and we'll go back to Cincinnati a little bit. I mean, I think them moving into the Big 12 is the best thing they could have done.
Absolutely not. Look at what happened to Rutgers. To me, Cincinnati is on par with Rutgers, and Rutgers has fallen off since 2000. I think it was 14 when they were all right, but even probably before then. But it's not a lateral move. It's a move. You needed to have a lateral move, and now you've moved yourself in like Texas in a no-win position. You were going to be the weakest team in that division, and you're
I don't
just
know.
not.
I
It's
don't
not the
know.
right time. It's not the right time.
I think Cincinnati, when you really look at the Big 12, you kick Oklahoma and Texas out. Oklahoma State steps into that, prime dog
Dominant
spot.
football.
But I mean, that's it. Like, you've got Kansas State, Kansas, Texas Tech, BYU, TCU, West Virginia. Cincinnati can beat all of those teams. I mean, and
You think
that's
they
the
can
way I
beat
see
like
it.
a TCU that's a good year, or like a Baylor? Baylor's always going to be competitive.
I think it's important for Cincinnati to keep their coach because he's doing so well with the recruiting in Cincinnati that once you open up the Big 12 areas for recruiting, I mean, you're only going to get better talent. And, you could look at it.
Can Cincinnati really recruit against Ohio State? Because now you've said, hey, it's Big 10 or Big 12, Ohio State or Cincinnati. You can't go against Ohio State. The kids that are going to.
The problem with the Big 10 is they're sitting still watching all this happen, not doing anything. If they think that that's going to work for them, they're going to be sadly mistaken. Because what I think is going to happen is you're going to have the formation of super conferences with the Big 10 looking from the outside in.
The Big 10 and ACC are both already super conferences that just have the down years lately. The SEC is already a super conference. It's these other guys, the Big 12, who's trying to create a level similar to SEC or Big 10.
Well, I mean, I'm talking even bigger than what it is now because I think you're going to get to the level of NFL size conferences, like 15,
They're just eliminate the Pac-10
teams.
and have all the Pac-10 guys.
I mean, that's what. See, essentially, what I thought was going to happen, and it still could, was that the Big 12 would split, and you would have part of them go to the Pac-12, part of them go to the ACC, and part of them go to the Big 10, and then you would have your 4 super conferences. That makes the most sense. And so far, the Big 12 just hasn't surrendered to that. But the ACC, the Big 10, or the Pac-12, none of those have made any moves to do anything like that. The SEC is the only conference that's actually looking at the big picture to grow the conference into something bigger. If the SEC ends up being the dominant conference for the rest of our lives, it's not because anything they did, it's because nobody else did anything. They just stood by and watched and let it happen. And that's kind of how I look at that. I mean,
I don't think that's a feasible scenario in college football, is to have your NFL-sized super conferences. The NFL is a national entity. For college football, it's regional. It's always going to be a regional thing. You got to have West Coast, East Coast. Those types of football don't merge. You got to have, the Central, the Big 10, Big 12, the Sun Belt. You got to have those smaller conferences in the middle, just as to act as a regional to give your team a chance. You can't say, hey, Texas, go compete in the SEC and win. It's just the problem that they're running into now.
But that's the thing is half the teams that are considered FBS teams, they're just going to be on the outside looking in. I mean, because as a West Virginia fan, that's where we're at. Because I see no stability in the Big 12 at all. I'm hoping West Virginia bails to the first place they can get out to, because I just don't see it lasting any amount of time. And that's the thing is,
where they're going to bail to is the AAC, the American.
Well, the big thing that I'm hearing is it's going to actually be the ACC. And I know a lot of people were like, well, they didn't want them before, blah, 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 blah. A lot of that's actually been resolved. If you talk to people that have some connections to the inner workings of it all, they say that the deal's already done. It's all but in the announcing and the deciding when it's going to happen. Now, do I believe that?
And I'm pretty sure the American's going to get dissolved anyway. So Probably
But
most of those teams end up in the ACC. And
but I could see, like, like you said, like keeping it regional within your conference. But then when playoff time comes, you expand the bowl series from 4 teams to 12, have wild cards and everything, and just structure it just like the NFL. Like that's what I mean. Like that's the level you're going to get to with the playoffs. And hell, that would be awesome. Could you imagine if the top 10 teams or top 12 teams were just put in and let them go to see who the best team is? I mean, I think that would be awesome.
that's what everybody wants. And wasn't that the argument when they created, like, getting back to 2014 when they created the playoff system? They always said the 4 teams was just to start with. They were always trying to expand to 8 or to 12. And now we've kind of stuck and gone with the 4 and let that slide. No, the whole plan from the get-go was always to make it end up being the top 12.
Well, and I think it still is. And the big roadblock standing in the way is going to be West Virginia, believe it or not. Because the guys that vote for expansion, it has to be unanimous vote. But Gordon Gee at West Virginia has a vote, and he's not going to vote to expand it until West Virginia, I think, is in a more stable conference. So West Virginia is kind of in a power position, so to speak. And I think eventually that's what it'll get to. But I have a feeling that over the next couple of years, the shit's really going to hit the fan. Like this coaching carousel we're on. Imagine when it's teams on the carousel, like teams going from this conference to this conference and this conference to that conference. And I mean, I really do think that's going to happen.
No, it's already happening. It's becoming that way. With what is it? UCF is going to the Big 12 as well. And
I don't think it detracts from football. I think it'll actually make a better quality product, especially with the portals and stuff. Like, it's the days of Alabama having 3 5-star quarterbacks sitting on the bench is over. If those guys can go play, and get NIL money at a smaller school, they're going to go. I mean, like,
oh, absolutely.
When you got kids making millions of dollars a year, why would they compete for that with each other?
The only problem I see is the kids, like the top tier kids, the blue chip kids. Absolutely, they're going to go all over the place. So you're never going to tell what team is good when, because it's going to be stacked with talent. The problem I see is going to be the kids that aren't as talented now don't have a shot, even at the smaller schools. Even D2 schools probably now are going to have more talent, and just kids that, like, my example, because I'm wearing a USF jersey or a hoodie, is JPP when he was in the Giants, now the Tampa Bay, is JPP went to a small school. JPP was a great, defensive player before he blew his hand off, even after he blew his hand off. But who JPP is, and he never got invited to go to like a Florida State, Ohio State, Alabama, Auburn. Any of those teams, they all passed him up, and he went to USF because he was a local, but because it was the only school that even gave him a scholarship.
Well, and that's true. And that speaks to why, like, football expansion in general for professional football needs to happen. Like the XFL, this second incarnation of the XFL was a great product. So much talent from top to bottom that just don't fit into the NFL. Quarterbacks, you got 32 jobs, and that's 64 jobs with their backups, and that's pretty much it. That's all there is. And you have a lot of people that could continue to play that don't get the opportunity to go to the big schools. But you also see phenomenal talents come out of small schools that just, you don't even know how you've never heard of that person.
Coming out of Miami.
Yeah.
Which I think after last week, just get out of the league and retire. You've had a good career. Go.
Yeah, I think he's about done. I'm hoping Pittsburgh will pick up old Kenny Pickett from Pittsburgh Panthers. I really like him. I think he'd be a really good fit. Plus, anytime you can recruit a player that played for your college team in your town, in your NFL town, man, that's going to sell tickets.
I think you talked about that with we're talking about LSU earlier with Matt Canada being their offensive coordinator. Matt Canada's obviously with Pittsburgh now. I think Matt Canada is focused on like the Pittsburgh area, West Virginia area guys. He likes being the local guy. And honestly, Matt Canada is like the only thing saving Pittsburgh right now. Is like I said earlier when I was talking off recording was Tomlin's ruining that team. Big Ben's done. You have no backup quarterback really. Like Pittsburgh, the Steelers are on a decline, and they're going to be on a decline for a while. So yeah, if they get the local kids, at least you save a little bit of that market.
I'm Sam the Man, and this is Greg. This is the Mountaineer Effect. We appreciate everybody tuning in. Like we said, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Check Greg out on Puck and Schmuck. It's an up and coming hockey channel. They do some funny stuff over there. And if you're like me and kind of hockey ignorant, it's a good place to go and learn a little bit about the way hockey's functioning now, because it's a little different than what I grew up with watching. Really, have a good night. Thanks for tuning in.